welcome everyone to today's workshop. We're going to talk about reference mining and citation searching. That's a strategy for looking for related articles and works by the same author or the same journal. Okay, so in today's workshop, we're going to talk about citation mining. So what is citation mining? Have you heard of that term before, Christian or Michelle?
No.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. So Michelle, what do you know? What have you heard about it?
All the importance of the citation, right? To point what I want to specify, and also about to give the writer his rights, right? His copyrights.
Oh, yes, definitely. Creating a citation to provide to give credit where credit is due. But today we're also going to talk about how to look at those citations and mine them, and we'll see what I mean by that. We're also going to provide a quick review of the databases, just so that you know where to find that perfect article. We're going to look at the option to search journals A through Z, and we're going to touch upon the usefulness of using Wikipedia to also citation mine, right? To find additional sources. All right, so what is citation mining? Citation mining utilizes the known information about a specific article to identify other articles that are relevant. In other words, when you find one article that you like, you can take a look at the works cited or the references section that author has included to find other articles that are also useful to your research. And the Illinois Library has done a wonderful job of outlining this topic. I'm going to give you this link in the chat box so that you can look at it on your own time. We've used, this is our source, right? I've used some of these tips in the presentation, so be sure to look at the original source, which is the Illinois Library. All right, so coming back to the presentation, we're going to start with, we mentioned that we're going to talk with a review of databases. All right, so if you are on the main page, if you hover over academics and click on libraries, you arrive at the Learning Resources website. And then underneath the website, underneath the search box, you have very important blue links, including a link to the databases. And this is another link that you should definitely bookmark on your personal device, okay? Because this is your collection of databases, and databases are extremely important because that's the ideal location for you to run your search, right? To conduct research. Every institution, no matter where you are, uses the same format. So let's say instead of MDC, you were at FIU, you're also going to utilize the databases there. And the system is very similar. You see how you have that alphabet menu, you have the databases A through Z. You will notice that there are more databases at other institutions at times because they may have graduate programs, they may have specialized schools like medicine and law, but it's the same idea, which means that if you learn to use the databases here at Miami-Dade College, that is a skill that you can leverage for success as you continue in your studies in other universities. And even if you leave the state, so like, let's say you go to Massachusetts and you study at, let's say, we can look for this one. So look at MIT. It's the same organization. The colors of the school, of course, are different because we are sharks, so we are blue and white. So the colors change, but the format is exactly the same. You still have that A through Z menu. You still have the alphabetized listing of databases. So again, I encourage you to always begin your search using the databases. Now, we wanted to talk, let me come back here. So let's say so if you, when you find an article, right, if you scroll all the way down, you're going to see that there's a list of references. And if you really liked what the author is saying, you may want to continue your search using the research that they conducted. So let's say for an 1101 or 1102 class, you were reading The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe, and you wanted to talk about the experience of paranoia or trauma, or the sense of that nervous sense that he conveys with the language, and you really like the analysis that was made by author Sasa, you can look at the references that were included and see, oh, okay, so maybe I would like to look at this 2020 Edgar Allan Poe, The Black Cat and the Telltale Heart, Not Quite a Mirror Image. So like that comparison between those two works to continue your research. So that's what we mean by citation mining. Look at the references that another author has included, an author that who's written a piece that you like, an article that you like, to find more articles, more perfect articles. Does that make sense, Michelle? Christian? Guillermo? Hi, welcome, Guillermo. Welcome, Barbara. Barbara, by the way, is my fellow librarian here at Homestead Campus. So say hello to Barbara.
Hi, everybody. Makes perfect sense.
Wonderful. All right, so let's take a look at that JSTOR database that we were looking at, right? Because we want to know, how do you find that perfect article? It's always to start with the databases. And as we saw, we are not the only institution that does that. Every academic institution has a list of databases that the students are meant to use to conduct the research. And it doesn't just happen in the state of Florida, it happens everywhere, right? So start with the databases as opposed to Google. Google is our friend for many searches, but ideally you're using the databases first. Okay, so we are going to feature two databases, EBSCO, which is really a collection of databases, and I'll show you what I mean, and JSTOR, okay? So we can look at JSTOR first. So let's say, for instance, we were at, how do we get there again? What was the first step? Guillermo, Christian, Michelle. What was
Academics.
yes, and then?
Libraries.
Yes. And then underneath the search box, you click on databases, and you're going to, if it's the very first time that you log in, it'll ask you to use your MDC ID. So right now it's remembering who I am, so it's not asking me. But again, if you hover over academics and you click on libraries and then you click on the databases, you'll be asked to log in, because these databases are only available to MDC students, right? And we're looking at JSTOR, so I'm using the menu up here to click on the J for JSTOR. JSTOR is a great database for conducting literary analysis, right? Definitely, I recommend that one. I'm going to drop the link in the chat box so that you can follow along. All right, and see how it's asking me to sign in. So you would use your MDC account information, usually your first name, last name, 00, whatnot, and your password. Okay, so J for JSTOR, click on JSTOR, and then you can run your search. So again, let's say we were reading the short stories by Edgar Allan Poe. You can enter his name in the search box. Okay, just like that, just like you would with Google. And then you have your excellent list of sources. One of the great features here is that you can search within the results. So let's say you wanted to talk about Edgar Allan Poe and a specific topic in particular. So like maybe insanity. Let's put that in there. And then now from the 8,000 plus results, now you're narrowed down to 719. If you see something you like, you can scroll, right? Every single one of this has the option to download, to save to cite, but you can click on the journal that looks interesting, and then it'll give you the full text But look how cool. It'll also tell you that this particular article that was written in 1991 has been cited by 10 other authors. And that's how you can find more recent related articles. So for instance, this one that was written in 2017, it's also talking about the same story, but it's exploring auditory images. So you can conduct further research, look at related sources. This is another way to mine the references, to look at the parts that were cited by, right? Items that, on JSTOR that cite this particular article. Okay, so let me come back to the presentation. So definitely review articles that cite that article. Oh, go ahead, Michelle. You had a question?
What database will be good for law? That is my question. Which database will be good for law?
For law, you have several, and I can show you here. We're going to look at EBSCO, which is also a great one to use. But if you look at all of the databases A through Z, you can also use the limiters on the top, the collapse menu, and look at those that have to do with criminal justice and law. And it's already, you already have 14 recommended databases. So you have all of these databases that they recommend, and then it tells you which librarians are the liaisons for those disciplines. And then you also have related LibGuides, which are websites that librarians create on a particular topic or particular course. So these would be an example, but amongst them are these EBSCO databases, which we're going to look at next. So definitely those. Let's look at that. All right, so again, finding the perfect article starts with the databases. We looked at JSTOR. We'll come back to that again. Let's switch gears and look at EBSCO. So EBSCO is very special because, do you remember how many databases you have with your Miami-Dade College account?
Over 100.
Yes, in fact, you have 113 databases. And of those 113 databases, 42 are EBSCO databases. Okay, so that collection is 42 databases. That's the package, right? So, but what's great about that is you can search all of them simultaneously. So let's take a look at how to do that. Remember, we were academics, libraries, and then databases underneath. And then we were looking at the databases A through Z, right? You can scroll down, and the very first one that appears says that it's an EBSCO database. So you can click on that, which is Academic Search Complete. I'll leave that in the chat box. So Academic Search Complete would be a general database. And then we're going to see that, okay, so every single of the 42, how many were there? 42, yeah. 42 EBSCO databases looks exactly like that. So once you know how to search one, you know how to search all. This is the menu and how it looks. You also have that search box, but here's the trick. Are you looking? Super quickly. You click on choose databases and you select all so that you can search all 42 simultaneously, because knowledge isn't just one dimensional, right? You have topics that have ramifications or relations, like connections with other disciplines. So for instance, if you're talking about Edgar Allan Poe, you're talking about literature, right? But you're also talking about medicine, because you're talking about insanity, you're talking about illnesses, you're talking about maybe history, maybe social sciences, you're talking about different disciplines as well. And in this way, you can search all of them with one search. So the trick is to click on choose databases and select all, and then click OK. You'll also notice that before you put in your search box, your search terms in the search box, you can also limit your results to full text and peer reviewed. Do you know what that means? What peer reviewed means? Have you heard that term before? Maybe you have heard peer reviewed, or maybe academic or scholarly or refereed. What does that mean? What is the difference between a regular popular source and a peer-reviewed, scholarly, refereed, academic source? Do we know? Barbie, you want to tell us really quickly?
Sure. You hear me okay?
Yes.
So peer-reviewed are articles that are written and published by people in that field of study. So for instance, an article in a psychology journal would be peer-reviewed by people within that discipline. That wouldn't be me because I'm not a psychology major. I haven't studied psychology. So my article would be published in Time magazine, whereas somebody that's a scholar in that field of study, the peers review the articles and then select them for publication in those journals according to the discipline. So that's sort of the difference between a journal article that's been peer reviewed as opposed to an article that was written for a magazine by a reporter or a journalist that knows nothing about that particular field of study.
Yeah, or whose knowledge may be limited, right? But
Yes,
it's
yes.
definitely not going to undergo rigorous review the way that a peer-reviewed source will. So anyhow, we can enter our search terms in the search box. Thank you, Barbara. For example, let's say we were conducting research about diabetes, right? And as soon as you start typing in your topic in the search box, EBSCO helps you out, just like Google. Would you like to search about type 2 diabetes, type 1, maybe management, maybe education, prevention? So let's say we wanted to do diabetes management, and then I click search. There are other limiters here that are outside the scope of this workshop, but that's the basic way to run your search. Then you can scroll down and see that you have 67,000 plus results. What's great is that you have the academic journals here, which are the peer-reviewed, scholarly, refereed sources. You have the full text. You can limit to full text as well, because sometimes there's a slight delay in publication and there might be sources that appear but that are not linked to the full text just yet. If you want to avoid being aggravated by that, you can click on full text. But you can scroll through the results and see, you know, what you like. So there are many pages here. Let's just go to the second page. Something like this. Early onset type 2 diabetes, clinical implications, diagnosis, and management. Let's say we like that. We can take a look at that article. And then here are some more tips for mining the references. Okay. First of all, if I take a look at it, I have the abstract information. I have all of these very useful links, which we'll touch upon in a minute. You have these tools on the right that are extremely helpful, especially this yellow one that says cite. If you scroll down, you can see your APA source or MLA, right? And that's what you copy and paste onto your works cited page or onto your references page. Just make sure you look it over to make sure that there are no errors. But for the most part, you have a great start there for your references page and your works cited page. So if you click on PDF full text, you're going to see the full text information. This article is 10 pages long, written by David Morris. It talks about, the early onset of type 2 diabetes, clinical implications, diagnosis, and management. So you have some really interesting things here. And if you like what's happening here in this article, the information presented, you can go to the very end, right? After you finish browsing or reading the article, you have a section for references that starts here. And you can see, where did they get their information? They got their information from the American Diabetes Association. They got their information from this Diabetes Care journal that we can look at how to find. But if you really like this author, if I go back to my original page, I can look, this is the other tip, I can look for additional articles written by David Morris. So it's hyperlinked, so I can click on his name and see other articles that were written by him. Okay, or that he's a contributing author. So you have 1,500 other articles that appear with a David Morris.
Wow.
Look at this, lipid modification in people with diabetes. So if you wanted to continue looking at sources by that same author, you could do that by simply clicking on that link. You can also look at the journal that published this article to find related articles, okay? And you can also look at the major subjects. So let's say you really liked what they were talking about, symptoms, or maybe diagnosis, or maybe therapy, and you want to go off on another branch, right? A related topic, or to just focus your research further, you can use those major topics, subjects. So that's another way to go, another way to mine for similar information. Okay. So that was EBSCO. We remember how to choose databases, select all, how to a limit, right? So we looked at select all, we looked at the limiters, and we looked at the major subjects. The limiters included the full text, they included the peer-reviewed. You can also limit by date of publication. I can show you. So if I go back to my search, right, I can see that there are many more limiters. You can limit by full text, you can limit by peer reviewed, you can also limit by publication date. So you can either enter the dates in the little boxes, or you can use the toggle to just limit to maybe the first 5 years, the last 5 years, and so on. You can also limit to popular sources or peer reviewed articles or newspaper articles, depending on your research. Okay. Any questions so far? How to go to the database? Of course, Guillermo. Let me go there again. All right. So how do we go to the databases? What's the first step? What do we hover over? Library. Yes, academics, and then libraries. And then underneath the search box, you click on databases. And Guillermo, I strongly suggest that you bookmark this link, which is the link to the databases. And today we're looking at JSTOR, which was for literary analysis. And we're looking at the EBSCO database, which is really a collection of 42 databases. And they're very important because they will cover lots and lots of disciplines, and you can also run a simultaneous search, right? By selecting, by clicking on choose all, choose databases, and selecting all. So just to review, you click on choose databases, select all, and then click OK. And then you enter your search terms in the search box. You can also limit to full text and peer reviewed even before you put in your search terms in the search box, along with other limiters. These limiters will also be there as soon as you run your search. But I'm so glad, Guillermo, that you asked to review this, because I want you to remember it. It is a skill that you can use when you move on to FIU or to another state. It's the same process, and you'll see those EBSCO databases again and again. Okay, let's come back.
Yeah. Very exciting. Now you're already using.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you, Michelle.
And you know, Liseth, underneath each database title on that list, it gives you a short summary of what those databases cover. And just reading under that academic search complete one, the databases don't only cover the most current information, but you can see that one of the articles goes back to 1865. So you also can get historical information depending on what you're researching, and a lot of times using that historical data to compare with what's going on in the current situation is very helpful.
Definitely. So just to answer, thank you, Barbara, so much. I'm so glad that you've joined me here. I'm answering Guillermo's question. So he's asking, the process was libraries, academics, libraries, and then the third step is the search box. Underneath the search box, you click on databases. So on the main page, you hover over academics, you click on libraries, and then underneath the search box, you have the link to databases. You could also go to tools, search tools and services, and you can see the databases there. But honestly, my favorite way to get to the databases is just 3 steps. Academics, 1. Libraries, 2. 3 would be databases right underneath the search box. And that's what gets you to the collection of 113 databases. So, all right, let's keep going. So we looked again at how to select all. We sampled the limiters. We looked at the major subjects, right? So let's see. So again, this was the article that we looked at, the early onset type 2 diabetes, clinical implications, diagnosis and management. We clicked on David Morris and got to see other, I believe it was 110 articles written by him that you could have browsed. You can also browse similar articles published by that same journal, which is the Journal of Diabetes Nursing. And you can also click on the major subjects. So these, all of this, the text here would have been hyperlinked, right? And you can go and browse symptoms, diagnosis, therapy. If after having read the article, you realize that that's the route your research is going to take. But one of the most important things, as we've mentioned before, is that you look at the references included by David Morris or the author of the article that you liked to find related sources, because this is what they read. This is what they browse to then gather information and draw conclusions and provide support for the research. All right, so here's another, the mining tool tip again. Search for articles by the same author by clicking on that hyperlinked author's name. Oh, we have more. We have more information in the chat box. Oh, I'm so glad, Michelle. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. All right, so let's take a look at JSTOR again. EBSCO, as we saw, it's really a collection of 42 databases, right? And so that's going to cover lots and lots of disciplines. That's a multidiscipline collection. But JSTOR is great for literary analysis. And you can search within the results, as we saw earlier when we put in insanity on the margin. And you can also see the cited by. So just to refresh that right here, we'll go back to JSTOR. So using the alphabet menu, or you can scroll down, but just to get there faster, you click on the J for JSTOR. And again, you know, you can even do like, we could do a different author. We could do like Maya Angelou, right? If you're reading poetry or a short story or poetry. So you can search within the results for a specific word, or you can search or you can look at the articles. Let's see. What shall we look at? Let's click on this article. Really, whichever one you choose is going to give you that same source. So like this right here on the left, right? About this issue, item details, but you can look at the cited by. So this article that was written in 1987 was cited by 7 other authors, right? And this one is from 2021. So this is where you can find more recent work that's related to this article. You also have related text in other journal articles here on the margin. So this is where you can find other articles that are just, if you found this one to be perfect, right? Or a good fit, then you can find related ones here on the left.
It really narrows it down. You know, instead of looking at that first result list, this really narrows it down to what this article is about. And if, again, if this article is it relates to what you're writing about, then this is a definite way to find other articles that will help you.
Yes, definitely. Okay, let's come back here. So again, we looked at the cited by section and we looked at the related text. Another thing that you can do is run a search for the journal article. So like it's the journal, the actual journal. So if a journal of narrative studies or something like that, you wanted to go directly to that journal, you can, instead of going through databases, you can also click on journals A through C. So you can use that to find the journal by name and the issue by date. Let's take a look at that. So if you were, again, academics, libraries, right? Instead of clicking on databases, if you click on journals A through Z, which is right next to it, you can run a search for a specific journal. So let's say we wanted to run a search for like diabetes care, right? Which was the journal that where we found that other the early onset article that we were looking at. So if we click on that, we'll see whether or not we have access to that journal via MDC and related ones, right, that have those words in the title. So we'll see right away that this journal is peer-reviewed, which is useful information in case your professor says, no, this has to be a peer-reviewed source. It's telling you that it's online, so it's readily available. You don't have to actually go to the library and make a copy or like look at the physical item. This is available online. The second step would be to click on one of the full text availability, meaning that this diabetes care journal is available to you from different sources. You don't just have one source. So I'll just go ahead and click on the very first one to retrieve that journal. And then you'll see that you have the latest issues right here, January 1st, 15th, February 1st, 2023. These are all 2023. But if you wanted to look at the collapse menu, you can go all the way to 1999 because this coverage, this journal is available from August 1st, 1999 to current. But let's say we wanted to look at a specific journal. You can see that you have the articles here. But this is when you want to find a specific issue, a specific date, a specific journal, all right? So again, those steps were to hover over academics, click on libraries. Instead of clicking databases, you're clicking on journals A through C. You're entering the name of that journal in the search box, and then you're going to be given a list of full text availability, and just select one of them and then narrow your results by date. So it's either the collapse menu or you'll see on the right other dates if it's an EBSCO, and we'll see an example for that. How are we doing on time? Okay, not too bad. So here's an example. Okay, so let's say you were looking at the journal Diabetes and Primary Care. You'll see that because you found articles like how to minimize insulin errors or how to calculate the amount of insulin to prescribe. These are both from Diabetes and Primary Care. You can see those issues and then all of the issues that are also available to find related articles. Would you like to see how that search is done? Let's see.
Yes.
All right, so let's do that. So again, it was academics, libraries, and then originally we go straight to the databases. But if you know the name of the journal, which in this case it was Diabetes Care, what was it? Diabetes and Primary Care. All right. You can go directly to journals A through Z. Diabetes and Primary Care, there it is. And then you'll see you have it available online. It's a peer-reviewed article, a peer-reviewed journal. you see that full text availability is there from EBSCO, Gale, like all of these databases give you the full text. So I'm just going to click on the first one.
Seth, from that page, can you search the entire journal for a topic like insulin? I see above that where you clicked on this particular database. Can you search, like, for instance, if your professor gives you the assignment to use a journal peer-reviewed about diabetes care, and you found one, this one, and you have to write a paper about insulin. So once you find the journal, can you search that journal for the topic?
That's a great question. I'm so glad that you asked. You click on the option to search within the publication. So
I see.
You see all the issues from 1999 onward. You can collapse and see the latest issue from 2023, the issues from 2022. But if you just want to look for a specific word, you can click on search within the publication and then put in the words like Barbara said, like insulin resistance, or something that you wanted to search for, and conduct your search. Another thing that you could do is to limit by full text, but we already know that everything will be there because we went through the journals A through Z, right? So it's only going to give us what's available. But for instance, this one is great. How to calculate the amount of insulin to prescribe per month, how to minimize insulin errors. And these are recent, 2022. So you could use those in your research if this is what you were, if that was the focus of your research. And again, you have more articles by Jane Diggle. You have other articles from diabetes and primary care. You have other articles that have to do with these major subjects of insulin administration and dosage, prevention and control, education, treatment errors, health personnel, and then minor subjects if you wanted to branch out from this topic. Again, you have your tools, this yellow button being one of the most useful buttons, because you can copy this information, place it into your references page, your annotated bibliography, your works cited page. Just make sure that the correct information is italicized, namely the name of the journal, but also nothing is in all caps. Things are the way that they should be. Just give it a once over. And then you have your full text PDF, which is what you need, right? This is the actual information, the article in its entirety. And then one of the things that we've learned in this workshop is to look at the resources that they looked at, the references that they provided, to find additional articles that are related to this topic and that are related to your research. All right, let's come back here. So again, the other tip was to search using relevant terms in the perfect article. So let's say you come across an article that you really, really like, and there weren't many others. So pay attention to the words that are used in that particular or perfect article, and then use those to find related articles. So let's say I really fell in love with this article that said early onset. Then maybe that's the word that I should be using in subsequent searches, right? So look at the specific words that are used in the organization of that knowledge, right? So if it's a specific word, then that's what you might include as another search term. Does that make sense? Did I?
Yes.
All right. So like, let's say I was running another search, right? Academic search complete. Do you guys remember the trick to search all 43? How do we search all 43 EBSCO databases? Guillermo, Nadia, Christian and Michelle. Yes, choose database, right? And then select all and click OK. So now, instead of putting just diabetes management, you may want to also put in early onset because you like that article that used that term, right? So we can do early onset, right? So now it's going to search for these terms and these terms. So articles that have all of those terms together. And now instead of having those thousands and thousands of results, I'm down to 124, but I'm going to get those articles that are more focused to what I want. Okay, so that's another tip. All right, so now let's take a look at another tip, which is let's say you were given a topic to write about, but it's new. It's a new topic for you. You've never heard of it before. A good way to become familiar with the topic and gather background information is to use Wikipedia. I know that Wikipedia is not a source that generally faculty would say you can include, right? Because it's tertiary, but you can always use it to gather information, and you can also mine the references and external links. So let's take a look at how to do that. You pull up, let's say you pull up an article about diabetes. You can read about it. You can see that there are these hyperlinked areas where you can gather more information or clarify further, right? If you aren't familiar with the new term, and you can also look at the references. So let's go there. So let's do Wikipedia. Let's do diabetes. Okay, so here's a Wikipedia article about diabetes. And if I am completely unfamiliar with this term or this topic, I can read about it, right? And then if I come across terms that I'm also unfamiliar with, right, that are helping me understand it, like endocrine diseases, and I don't know what that means, it's really useful to have these that you can hover over it and it can give you what that means, right, as opposed to having to run a side search about this new term that has come across. What are anti-diabetic medications? What is polydipsia, right? All of these things. And then so to gather information, to build background information, this is wonderful, right? And then if you scroll all the way to the bottom, or you can use this link right here, because this is your menu, right? Your, yeah. You can go to the references that have been cited, and you can see the articles that are available. You have the links, all of these blue links. You can check out the references that they cited, and these you can probably use because there are organizations or actual journal articles published by an academic source or something like that. So you could probably use those in your research. But to build background knowledge, Wikipedia is great, and then to mine these references. Take a look and see what you can use, and so on.
Yeah, one of the most important things when you're doing research is to know where your information comes from. So if you get the background knowledge from Wikipedia, you have to know where that information comes from. You don't just, someone says, "Oh, how did you know that?" Wikipedia. Well, that doesn't really give them a good source, so you look at these references that Wikipedia is using, and then if you click on one of those, especially the ones that are more, either peer-reviewed organizations, or you could tell it's from a journal, then that's the source that you want to be able to give and tell somebody, especially a professor, if you're putting it in writing. Even in conversation, you want to be able to know where your information comes from, so that person can see that you've done the research and you're knowledgeable about what you're writing about or talking about.
Definitely. But look at the difference between gaining access to a journal via the databases as opposed to getting access via the open web. If I go to Wikipedia and I click on one of these links, I clicked on to, just as an example, on this primary care diabetes article from 2014 that looked promising. It's all of a sudden I've got cookies, I've got a login. Sometimes I get lucky and I do have the full text PDF, but sometimes it's asking me to log into my organization, or it's asking me to pay for the article. Whereas if you access the article via the Miami-Dade College databases, that won't be a problem. if it does ask you to access through your organization or through your institution, you can always put in Miami-Dade College, right? And gain access to the article that way. But the best bet is always to go through the databases. And in fact, if you go through the databases, you click on G for Google, you can run your Google search, your Google Scholar search through Miami-Dade College, so that those you'll skip that step of having to log in, right? Of having to look for the institution that you are affiliated with or a student at. So, but it's a good way to get information. You can always run a reverse search, right? And look for instance, primary care diabetes in the journals A through Z, as we looked at, and see if we can find this 2014 article. So like if I go back, right, to the journals A through Z, and I run a search for this journal, we see that for this particular journal, we don't see it there, but there's a related one. And then you can search and see if the dates are covered, or you can search within it. I skipped a step, which was to click on one of the full text availability, and then you can see the dates. There they are. And you can always search within the publication, but this isn't exactly the one we were looking at. But there are other ways that you can gain access, full text access to this if you don't have it on the open web, is to make an appointment with the librarians or chat with a Florida librarian via Ask a Librarian, and I'll show you in a minute how to do that. So, all right, so coming back to the presentation to review, the most important tip we talked about today is to mine the references, right? Look at the references provided by the author of the journal that you found, this perfect journal article, or this article that works for you. Look at the references that they provided, and then see if you want to use those references as well in your research. Search for articles by the same author by clicking on their name, right? And you'll see that it's hyperlinked in blue. Review articles that cite that article, and you see that in JSTOR on the left. Search using relevant terms in the perfect article. So like, for instance, if you found an article that is perfect and there are certain words in the title that will lead you to related articles, use that. We saw the example of the diabetes management article, and then we saw that it said early onset. And if that's the way we want to go, if that's the way we want to narrow our search, then we can use those related terms. All of these tips are coming from that Illinois library. We provided that link in the search box if you want to look further. They did a wonderful job of giving that to us. So Ask a Librarian. Ask a Librarian is a chat service that you can use when you conduct your research. You click on the link for Chat with a Florida Librarian, and you have this pop-up box that asks you for your name, county, but that's optional. You can go ahead and ask your question. Hi, I'm conducting research. I'm looking for an article about Edgar Allan Poe, specifically the Telltale Heart story, and I need an article, or I need help citing a source. They can help you find the articles, the full text link for an article. It's a great chat service to have. Barbara and I staff it, from time to time. In fact, Barbara is one of our champions. She is a wonderful Ask a Librarian, provide service via Ask a Librarian. And what's also great about Ask a Librarian is that they're open until midnight, Sunday to Thursday, and 10 to 5 Friday and Saturday, because Learning Resources College-wide is open until 9, right? So our hours are Monday to Thursday, 7:30 to 9, Friday, 7:30 to 5, and Saturdays, 8 to 1. But if you need help outside of those hours, you can always chat with a Florida librarian until midnight, because sometimes life gets hectic and you have a chance to tackle the homework at a later time. And that's okay. You can use Ask a Librarian. Another resource that you have is to meet with a writing tutor, right? So after you write your paper, your essay, your research, and you want help, maybe putting together that thesis statement, maybe looking at the organization of your paragraphs, you have wonderful tutors college-wide, right? At every single campus. These are the tutors here at Homestead campus. We're actually hiring 2 others, but they're wonderful. They're ready to help. You have the support of librarians to help you conduct the research, but also of writing tutors to help you with your writing. So you are not alone in completing these assignments, and utilize those services. Definitely use the databases, make an appointment to see a librarian and to see a tutor. And we can tell you how to do that if you've never done that before. Remember, it was hover over academics, click on libraries. We looked at databases, we looked at journals A through Z, and if you scroll to the bottom, you could click on connect with a librarian or connect with a tutor to make an appointment. And if you click on one of the bubbles, really you only need one, because if you click on book a tutoring appointment, you can even book an appointment with an advisor. All of the appointments are there on the same spot. So you just have to log in with your MDC ID. Unfortunately, I am not allowed in because I'm not a student, but we do have a video that shows you how to log in. Let me pull that up super quickly. Okay, this is the Learning Resources playlist on YouTube. I'm going to drop the link in the chat box.
Research librarians can help you find articles and sources for.
All right. All different kinds
Research
of
librarians can help you find articles and sources for research assignments or help with MLA and APA citations. The first step is to make an appointment. Navigate using your MDC account information. Using the menu on the left,
you select appointments, and then you can use the collapse menu. Are you able to see on your side the screen?
Yes.
Okay. And then you select on schedule an appointment, and then there are 3 collapse menus. One is telling you, hold on, let me take off the. All right, hold on one second. For some reason, I see.
research librarians can help you find articles and sources for.
Okay, so we were at schedule an appointment, schedule an appointment, and then the 3 collapse menus. What is the purpose of your appointment? Do you want to meet with an advisor, a tutoring appointment? And then after you select tutoring appointment, the next one is to scroll to select a service. You can meet with a writing tutor, a tutor in a different subject. And at the very end, number 10 is a citation or reference help with a librarian. Then you pick a date, and then it tells you which campus do you want to meet. You can select by campus, select by individual, or select by time, because you're not limited to one campus. You are college-wide sharks, and Learning Resources helps you college-wide. At every single campus, you have these services. They may vary slightly, but it's the same idea. So then you can say whether you want to meet with your tutor or librarian in person or online via Zoom, the way that we are meeting now for this workshop. And then you have these boxes that you can leave clicked so that you can get an email and a text reminder. Just make sure that the number on file is correct, and then click schedule. It's quite simple, it's quite intuitive, but if you ever need help, we are available here at the Homestead Library at 305-237-5153. In fact, I encourage you to write down the phone number of the library of your home campus. And if you'd like those numbers, I can drop that link in the chat box. If your home campus is not Homestead, you can always make sure to know which of the numbers is your home library, because you can call and say, I need to make an appointment with the librarian, I need to make an appointment with a tutor, or any question you might have, we will direct you appropriately. All right, guys, let me stop sharing my screen. Let me come back here actually and ask you if you have any other questions. Was that helpful?
Yes, very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. At this time, I will stop the recording.